Now, we need to dispel some myths and stop bad information from ruining the greatest financial tool in America. I want max funded IUL to become a household word like 401k, because it's way better than a 401k. So what are some of the myths out there? First of all, that the insurance policy is going to implode. It's going to crash and burn as you get older due to the cost of insurance going up. How many of you have heard that one? Okay? Or that when we're using this, whoops, let me go here, that Index Universal Life is simply a permanent insurance policy, wherein the cash values are invested in an index mutual fund. If that were true, from 2000 to 2012, you would have lost up to 40% twice in the cash value of that IUL. Our clients doubled and tripled their money during that 12-year period, okay? Number three, that when using the banking concept that whole life insurance is superior. I'll just spill that today. And that a fee-based advisor is the least expensive way to go. Life insurance is just too expensive. Well, let's talk about this for a few minutes. Just to give you background, I'm an old geezer, as you just realized, okay? I'm going on age 74. And my wife and I are celebrating in February our 53rd wedding anniversary. So I began in 1974, and there was only term insurance and whole life insurance back then. I was a big buy term invest the difference proponent because I did all the math, and if you did invest the difference and manage the investment, you would come out ahead, but there was a problem, okay? First of all, whole life company said, well, ours is a forced savings account. So we developed a product where every dollar the client put in, 1/3 would go towards insurance, a term to 65 life insurance policy. The other 2/3 would go into an annuity rider. And back then, interest rates were high, so it was crediting 7.5% to 8.5%. But all of our clients, they would assign out their annuity cash values every 90 days, there was no surrender charge, to a mutual fund of their choice. So from 1974 to 1980, I ended up with over 3,000 clients in 13 Western states with money invested in mutual funds, okay? And we were doing the darndest to manage that, to earn an average rate of return higher than the normal industry did, which was about 9%. We were trying to achieve 12%. Now, what happened is every time the market took a nosedive, I had to be in the office fielding phone calls, trying to calm down my clients. And so, in 1980, Universal Life was introduced by E.F. Hutton, okay? And they said, what are we thinking? Instead of trying to earn even a 12% rate of return, that's not what our clients are netting after tax. It's like playing red light, green light when you were a kid, okay? Some years you make money in the market, and some years you go back, and you're going back and forth and back and forth, and you're trying to average 12, but they're not netting 12 after tax in a tax-deferred IRA or 401k. Most of my clients were between federal and state tax, because 41 out of 50 states has a state income tax. They were in a 33% tax bracket. So if you earn 12, you're only netting, 8. In a 25% bracket, if you earn 12, you're only netting 9. See, if you have $1 million and it's earning 12%, theoretically, you should be able to pull out $120,000 a year without depleting principal. You pull out $120,000 and you pay $30,000 in a 25% bracket, or $40,000 in a 33% bracket in tax, you're only netting 8 or 9. And then the asset management fee is another 1% on that million. So you had to take 12 steps forward and 4 steps back in tax and another step back in fee. You were netting 7. E.F. Hutton said, we can do better than that. Let's bypass. Let's have our clients put money under the management of some of the best money managers in the world, the multi-trillion-dollar legal reserve insurance industry. They manage billions and trillions. And we can earn more safely an 11% rate of return, and net 10 after all costs, if we simply use the magic of life insurance for tax-free accumulation for living benefits. Everybody's out there selling it just for a death benefit. And I'm going to explain this in just a minute. And so we were able to earn 11% and higher back then because interest rates were high. You know that CDs at banks were paying 10, okay? My clients were never happier than when I got them out of the volatile market because they could earn 11 and net 10 after all costs and fees. I had clients putting in $500,000 and immediately taking $50,000 a year of tax-free income without depleting the $500,000 they put in there. There was a heyday. So my clients were thrilled. Let's fast forward to 1997. In the 1990s, interest rates started to come down. Now, interest rates are relative, but if you're paying interest or you're receiving interest, it's all relative. Interest rates are interest rates, whether they're on the paying end or the receiving end. So as interest rates started coming down, the insurance industry introduced variable whole life, variable universal life. No, I got my clients out of the volatile market. I've never owned a variable product, never will. But as interest rate came down, in 1997, I happened to be the #1 producing agent for 2 major carriers. And one of them back then was ING, and they introduced the first index universal life. And I said, this is the answer. I could continue to deliver for my clients as high as 11% or more and net 10, just like I did before, by structuring the IUL correctly, funding it properly, and here's the third part, managing it. It's called diversifying and rebalancing. I'm going to give you an insight today of what I'm talking about here, okay? So, it was like buy term, invest the difference on steroids. So, in case you're not aware, how many of you have studied my book, The Laser Fund? You'll learn about this in that book. Great, thank you. E.F. Hutton realized that in the Internal Revenue Code, for now over 120 years, money inside of a permanent life insurance policy accumulates tax-free under Section 72E of the Code. 7702 dictates how you can access your money, including all your gain, before age 59 and a half without a 10% penalty, totally tax-free. And Section 101A is the magic. That's when you finally die, because none of us are getting out of here alive. I don't mean out of this convention, I mean out of this life, okay? Now, we're going to leave behind something that would have sustained us had we lived longer. Now, Section 101A says, whatever you transfer in a life insurance policy, the death benefit is tax-free. Remember this one, it's the magic behind all this. So that's what E.F. Hutton was doing. They were saying, well, instead of trying to get the most insurance for the least premium, let's take the least amount of insurance we can get away with based upon a person's age, gender, and their health. And let's put in the most money, premium, the IRS allows as fast as they allow, and this thing will turn into a tax-free cash cow that will knock the socks off of traditional IRAs or 401ks because it's tax-free. It's not just tax-deferred if it's done right, okay? So that's what happened. Many of you know the story that in 1980, there was a massive exodus of money leaving the banks and the brokerage and the credit unions because they were safer, they paid higher interest, they were tax-free. And so the IRS went to Hutton and said, what are you doing? They said, we're not doing anything wrong. They took him to court, E.F. Hutton won. But then the IRS went to Congress and said, we have to change the definition of tax-free insurance. They're abusing it. So, long story short, under the Technical and Miscellaneous Revenue Act, that's under the Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act in 1982, the Deficit Reduction Act of 1984. Those are the TEFRA-DEFRA tax citations that dictate under Section 101A the least amount of insurance that's required if you're setting up a life insurance policy for living benefits, for tax-free accumulation as the primary objective. TEFRA and DEFRA gave parity. What's parity? Equality, which means this, listen close. It doesn't matter if you are a 20-year-old athletic marathon running female, or a 60-year-old, or a 78-year-old who came to me, a friend of our family back then, age 78. He had 3 blocked arteries, adult onset diabetes, a prostate cancer episode, 6 sisters predeceasing, and 3 brothers predeceasing. He was rated table D. What did he want? He wanted to put in $500,000 and start taking out $50,000 a year tax-free. He wanted rate of return, tax-free. So even though he was rated table D, he had the life expectancy of an 83-year-old. Tefra and DEFRA allowed us to squeeze down the death benefit even lower. A 22-year-old that wants to put in $500,000 might have to have $5 million of life insurance. But a normal 78-year-old might have to have $900,000, and people say, well, who pays $500,000 for $900,000 of life insurance? Our clients do. They're not doing it for the death benefit, they're doing it for the return, tax-free. Because he was rated table D, I just lowered the death benefit from $900,000 down to $750,000. He put in $500,000 and earned 10% net internal rate of return, started taking out $50,000 a year tax-free. The cost of insurance is the same. The percent of money required to go towards the insurance goes down the older you are and the more unhealthy you are. If he would have been uninsurable, I would have put it on his wife. It's the owner of the insurance policy that gets all of the tax-free income and tax-free accumulation. Are you getting it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what this whole idea was, okay? There was a massive exodus of money leaving between 1984 and 1988, and the banks and the brokerage firms couldn't compete. Because these are safer, they pay higher interest, they're tax-free, they blossom when you die. And so they didn't want to kill max-funded insurance. Why? Anybody know why? They didn't want to get rid of them. This is where they put 30 to 40% of their Tier 1 assets. Did you know that? In 2008, when 400 banks went under and 900 more were on the brink of going under, the federal government asked the 5 major banks in America to disclose where they had their Tier 1 assets for liquidity and safety. Guess where it was? Goalie, life insurance. They own life insurance on people, okay? Like I said, it's the owner. Banks back in 2008 were borrowing OPM, other people's money, and paying 1% on every million. They're paying 10 grand. They're turning around and putting in max-funded life insurance and earning just the general account portfolio rate without even linking to an index, and they're earning 5. How much more is 5 than 1? Don't say 4. It's 500%. How many of you would hire an employee for 10 grand if that employee made you an extra 50 grand?
Yeah.
That's a 500% return. It's a 400% profit on employment costs. How many of you would buy a widget machine for 10 grand if that widget machine made you an extra 50 grand?
Yeah.
That's what the banks do. And they increase their safety by 6 notches higher. A lot of these banks are only rated triple B. These insurance companies are rated triple A. That's 6 notches higher in safety, and they got 5 times the return. This is how money works. If a bank or credit union stopped paying interest, they would wither up and die. A bank or credit union's greatest asset is their liabilities. Do you understand how money works?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, so they didn't want to kill them, but they wanted to slow the flow. So that's why June 21st, 1988 is when TAMRA, the Technical and Miscellaneous Revenue Act, was passed. That affects 7702. They said, well, we just don't want people taking $500,000. I'm using $500,000 as an example. Nothing magic about that number. I want to keep it simple. And we don't want them to take the whole $500,000 out of our bank or our mutual fund all at once and put it in this insurance contract. So slow the flow. And so they did. And so generally speaking, if you're over age 50, you had to spread it out over 5 years with Universal Life. Whole life is 7 years. That's called the 7-pay test. 7-pay test is a misnomer with regards to Universal Life, okay? Now, we'll come back to that one. So, and then in 2021, Congress allowed us to be able to fill up an IUL in about 3 years and 1 day. And so you can get in the money faster in an IUL than you can a whole life policy, and I'm going to show you this a little bit. Whole life is good for death benefit. That's what it was designed for, but Universal Life, the intention all along was for living benefits, okay? Now, TAMRA said you had to slow the flow. So I'm going to illustrate this in just a minute, but first of all, why is it tax-free? Ever since 1986 tax reform, President Reagan's second term, there's only 3 types of income in America. Americans pay income tax on earned income, passive income, and portfolio income. Those are the common things. If you have income that is not one of those 3, there's nowhere on a 1040 tax return to put it. It's not even worth auditing. We have clients with $8 million in their IUL, and it's generating $600,000 to $800,000 a year tax-free income. They don't even have to file a tax return. That's how cut and dry this is, okay? Income generated out of an IUL is not any of those three types of income. Now, there's a lot of other reasons why it's tax-free, because it actually helps out America instead of widows and orphans being dependent on the government. So they made it tax-free. Now, I'm very big on structuring IUL correctly and funding it properly, and then managing it annually. So I'm going to teach you what I mean by this, okay? Here's something you wouldn't believe how many financial advisors, and unfortunately most whole life agents, are never taught, because it doesn't look good when they learn it. IRR, internal rate of return. So what's IRR? If you don't listen real close right now, you're going to be lost the rest of my presentation. IRR is the annual compounded rate of return required to achieve a given accumulation sum. Let's say 30 years into a policy, 30 years down the road, age 65, age 80, based on the money deposited at scheduled intervals. You look at the cash value at that point down the road, and you say, in order to end up with that much money, what kind of a rate of return would I have to be getting on all the deposits I made when I made them? This is complicated sometimes. In order to end up with this much money. That means all the costs and fees are already covered when I'm calculating internal rate of return. Have you got it? Okay, so here we go. Here is a well-constructed IUL. In an IUL, they started out at age 35, preferred plus, male. They started out with a $277,000 death benefit. This is an increasing death benefit because that's what you do if you have young people put it in monthly or annual, and then you switch to the level death benefit when you've stopped funding, okay? Now, 95% of my clients are 55 to 70, and so I use the level death benefit from day one, okay? But if you have a younger person, you start with increasing and then switch to level when you stop, okay? Now, there you go. Watch this. 30 years down the road, they put in 360 grand. They have 981,000 tax-free. In order to achieve that number, and these reports are available, it's just most agents don't ever print them. 5.87. You would have to be getting 5.87% rate of return on your money on all of those deposits in order to end up with that sum. What was the crediting rate really? 6.33. What's the difference between that and that? That's the actual cost of the insurance, fees, and everything retroactive back to day one. In other words, it's less than 0.5%. Now, you wouldn't believe how many IUL policies I look at. It doesn't even come close to that. If they're credited at 6.33, they're likely to net 2. You want to net within 1% of the gross rate of return, 20 and 30 years down the road. Are you getting it? Okay, now here we go. I'm going to show you here in a minute why through diversification and rebalancing, ever since Universal Life was introduced and then later Index Universal Life, my clients, the net internal rate of return has been 9.62%. That means I have to meet with my clients annually and change allocation, and I have to diversify, and I'm going to show you some ways to do that. So, I'm going to show you during the worst 10-year period since the Great Depression, IUL would have credited 7.23%. I'm talking about from the year 2000 to 2012. 7.23%. Even if you did nothing, you had 5 years where you got 0, and the other 5 years you got whatever the market did because it was positive, but only 2 of those years did you cap out, you would have had 7.23% return. Rule of 72. If you're earning 7.2%, your money will do what in 10 years? Double, okay? So, I'm going to be simple. If 500,000 in 10 years doubles to $1 million, doubles to 2 million, 8 million, 4 million. Over 30 years. Now that's where maybe most IUL agents stop. They think they've designed it right and everything, but, well, wait a minute. If you meet with your client annually and rebalance and diversify, I'm going to show you in a minute you can get up to an internal rate of return of 9.6. 9.6 divided into the rule of 72 means what? Your money doubles every 7.5 years. In the same 30-year period, you could deliver $8 million for your clients instead of half that if you pay attention to what I'm teaching you here. It's imperative you learn this. I'm talking about only a difference of 2.4% higher rate of return, and you end up with twice the result 30 years down the road. That's how critical this is. Okay, now, here is $12,000 a year for 30 years invested in the S&P index, okay? Let's say it's an index mutual fund. Now, you can't see this very well, but after 30 years, we look at this, and there is a cash value down here of $1.5 million, and I'm going to start taking out $155,000 a year of tax-free income if I live to be 120. What else does that? Okay, $155,000 a year of tax-free income. Now, the worst 10-year period since the Great Depression was 2000 to 2010. Here was the year 2000, and here's 9/11 terrorist attacks, 3 years in a row. Okay. Then we came back in 2004, 5, 6, okay? And then what happened? We had the negative year of 2008. This is the worst 10-year period. And look what happened. Money in the S&P, because it's sitting here and it's subject to these losses. You end up with 797,000. You started out with 842. You're not even back to where you were 10 years earlier. In the market, okay? In the market. With indexing, where you don't lose when the market goes down, but you don't make anything, zero is your hero, you end up with $1,455,000, nearly twice as much money, okay? Why is this? I'm going to super simplify rebalancing right now. Here's that 12-year period starting over here down on the bottom left, November of 1999, ending November of 2012. Here's the 2001 terrorist attack, okay? Our clients, you know, if you just sat there, this, by the way, this was an F&G policy, okay? So 0%, 0%, 0%. 3 years, 0. Do you know that in most 10-year periods, there's 7 gain years to every 3 loss years? This is the only 10-year period since the Great Depression. There were 5 loss years and only 5 gain years, okay? So after 2007 to 2008, 0, 0. 5 zeros, only 5 years did you make money. Only 2 of those years did you cap out. Here in 2004 was 17, and here it was 16. Guess what the average return was, even with that pathetic 10-year period? 7.23%. Our clients that had $1 million in the year 2000 had $2 million 10 years later. That's indexing, because you don't lose when the market goes down. Now here's a super simple way of talking about rebalancing. If I got together with my clients in an annual review, and they had 0, and I'm looking at the economy and everybody's still rubbernecking on the economic freeway and not going out to dinner and flying, which is what they were doing after 9/11, I just moved them back over to the general account portfolio rate, which was 5% at the time. So instead of earning 0, they earned 5. They earned 5. Okay? And then 0 in 2007, and I said, okay, move back over to the general account portfolio. We earned 5. They still got the cash, but guess what the rate of return went up to? 11.17. This is why, I mean, our clients earn 11.17, they net 10.07, about 10.1, okay? Now, here's an actual example of taking out $155,000 a year. Here's money in the market. It runs out of money in 5 years. In the market, okay? Whereas $155,000 a year just goes on forever. You still have a net of $2.6 million out here at age 84, okay? That's the difference. With indexing, the actual S&P performance started in 1981 through this period, okay? To today, 8.37% internal rate of return, whereas if you were in the market, the average internal rate of return was 5%. See why IUL is so wonderful? Because you don't lose when the market goes down, but you get to participate when the market goes up. This is the dream solution. Okay, now, if we had $1,000 a month deposited for 30 years, and you had an IRR of 9.6, it's going to grow to $2,076,000. This is what we achieve for clients, and you can do the same thing when you learn how to do this right. Now, Matt Sapala said, well, show them why this is better than buy term invest the difference, because I used to be a big buy term invest the difference proponent. First of all, if you started out with just ART, probably at least $100 of that $1,000 would go towards the term insurance. You'd only have $900 left over to invest. It's not going to stay that cheap, but you'd have to earn a 10.1% rate of return in order to have it accumulate the same amount of money. But if you did accumulate $2 million, investing the difference of $900 a month, that's going to be taxable when you take it out.
Yep.
It's only worth $1.5 million in a 25% bracket. So if you need to compete with IUL, you've got to have more money, right? So you'd have to accumulate 33%. You'd have to have $2.7 million. In order to do that, you'd have to have at least an 11.5% compounded rate of return investing the difference. That's if you allocated 90% of it to investment and 10% only to insurance. But I'm telling you, insurance is going to use up, a term to 65 is going to use up more like 33% of that $1,000. So if $330 went to a term to 65 and $670 difference was invested, you're going to have to earn 11.5% to achieve the same result. But after tax, you're going to need a 12.75% rate of return if you've only got 2/3 of that $1,000 that's actually being invested by investing the difference. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
To try to achieve a 12.75% rate of return is too risky. You can do it much safer with a diversified IUL. And when I say diversified, sometimes all we do is we will have our client put 40% allocated to a 1-year point-to-point, another 40% to a 2-year point-to-point, and another 20% to a 5-year point-to-point, no cap. And we leave it like that, and if you know the average is over 11% when you do that on actual historical performance on any 20-year period, you're back to the Great Depression. But hello, when there's anxiety, there's opportunity. When the market crashes, we go, oh, good news. We switch to 50% 2-year point-to-point, 50% to 5-year point-to-point, and the average goes over 14%. That's what I mean. You meet with your clients and service them every year, and you make adjustments as you go by diversifying and rebalancing. I'll give you another couple of examples in a moment. Okay. Now, you've probably seen me use this metaphor of a bucket. I mean, I've used this for over 50 years. An IUL is like a bucket, a repository, where I'm trying to design it to accommodate the amount of money that I want to reposition, to optimize underperforming and non-performing assets. I'll explain what I mean by that. And so, under TEFRA, DEFRA, and TAMRA, I take the person's age and health, and then I calculate the minimum death benefit required to accommodate the amount of money they want to put in, and we have to do it so it's not a MEC, so that we don't create taxable event when they access money, and we design it to comply. So I'm going to give you an actual example of this. My son Emran, in my book, talks about the assurance of self-insurance. Max-funded IUL, when EF Hutton thought about it, is you're actually self-insuring. You're using Section 101A to take your money, self-insure, and convert it to 100% tax-free money. Okay? So, here we go. If you are sitting down with a client, this is a super simple example, and you're optimizing assets. I'm going to show you here in a minute. You're looking at where their money currently is. See, the biggest mistake I see agents make is they're asking the client to put money into an IUL on top of what they're already doing out there. No. That's not an asset optimization specialist. You look at their assets and which ones are not passing the liquidity test, the safety test, the rate of return test, and the tax advantage test, as well as putting that money in an IUL would do. See, that's underperforming and non-performing assets, okay? When I do that in a seminar or a webinar, it only takes me about 20 minutes to do this, And so I wanted to pass the laser test better. See, laser is liquid asset safely earning returns. So for example, many times people will say, oh yeah, we're sick and tired of the volatile market on our IRAs or 401ks. We're not going to be in a lower tax bracket when we retire. I get it. And so they have maybe 300,000 in IRAs or 401ks, and they do a rollout. Not all at once, but over a 5-year period. And so if they take out 300,000 at a 33% bracket, they're only netting 200,000. But let's say they are going to net 200,000 after a IRA 401k rollout. Now, usually I wait till age 59 and a half, after age 59 and a half, so there's not a 10% penalty, but sometimes it even behooves me to do this before age 59 and a half, because the 10% penalty on top of their tax is no worse than what tax they're gonna be in if they put it off. I got another 200,000. You wouldn't believe how many people have rental properties. They're sick and tired of being that landlord, taking out the trash, fixing toilets, and fixing tenants. It's an albatross around their neck, but they think they're trapped because they've been doing 1031 exchanges and everything. I go, sell! Pay the capital gain at today's lowest rates and reposition into an IUL, and they're flabbergasted. It does better than the rental does, and they don't have to be a landlord anymore. Okay? So let's try to get 200,000 net from the sale of a rental property, and they have another 100,000 they inherited or whatever sitting in a bank earning next to nothing. Okay? That's 500,000. This is super simple. So I'm sitting down with this client, and they're 60 years old, and they have identified these 3 assets that do not pass the liquidity, safety, rate of return, and tax advantage test, as well as IUL would. And I simply say, Jim and Mary, if I could show you by repositioning this 500,000 how much better off you would be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road without increasing your outlay one dime, would you be interested? It's that simple of a question. Do you want to optimize your assets, or do you want to keep doing what you're doing? Because there's a huge difference. Would you like to see an illustration of how much better off you would be? It's the easiest close I've ever given. Now, I set up their bucket. If it's a male age 60 and I'm trying to accommodate 500,000, I only need about $1 million of death benefit under TEFRA and DEFRA. If this is whole life, it would be more. Whole life requires usually more insurance, so it's going to cost more. And I could fill that up about 125,000 a year, okay? So I could put in about 125,000. Whole life, I can only put in about 71,000 a year. Because it's a 7-pay test. I can get in more money faster with an IUL than whole life. It's right off the bat, it's got huge advantages over whole life because it was designed for cash accumulation. Whole life is designed primarily for death benefit. That's what it's good for. Now, we put in that money, and let's say in 3 years, if I put in 125,000 a year the first year, let's go back here, 125,000 the first year, the second year I'm now half full. The next year, okay, now I'm 3/4 full. This is 3 years and 1 day. Technically, in 3 years and 1 day in the 4th year, I can put in the remainder of the 500,000, and now I'm not allowed to put any more money in until when? About the 12th year. And then I can only put in about 1/11 of that if I want. Now it's fully funded, it's max funded. That's called the GSP, Guideline Single Premium, is the total amount that you're gonna be putting into the policy, at least in the first 11 years, but I'm doing it faster, okay? Watch. Once I have $500,000 in there, and this is a 60-year-old, so I'm using level death benefit, in 3 years and 1 day, how much is the insurance company charging me for insurance? What's the net amount of risk? If it's a level death benefit and I die, it leaves behind $1 million. I'm not interested in this being added on top of it. I'm interested in the best rate of return of 500 grand. The net amount of risk is the difference between the $1 million and my 500,000 of cash value. They're only charging me for half as much life insurance as they did 3 years earlier. Even though I'm 3 years older, the cost of insurance has gone down dramatically. See, Dave Ramsey doesn't understand this. Okay? Folks, the cost of insurance gets cheaper as you get older. Okay? Now, if it's done right, if I have a $500,000 and I'm earning 9.6, it's going to double to $1 million in 7.5 years. You wouldn't believe how many of my clients, by the 10th or 11th year, their cash value has grown to equal the death benefit. And see, these whole life agents say, well, whole life has guarantees. I go, guarantees for what? Well, the life insurance won't lapse. I said, Well, yeah, I don't need guarantees with IUL because I am self-insured in the 11th year on this. My cash value exceeds the death benefit. And my money now is 100% tax-free. I'm self-insured. I have assumed all the risk, and now it's tax-free from that point forward. Now, $1 million of cash value will generate $100,000 a year of tax-free income. But if you want to wait for another 7.5 years, $1 million doubles to $2 million. If you happen to die, it pays out $2.1 million, but they're 5% more. They're only charging you under TEFRA and DEFRA for 5% of the original death. 5%. The interest on $2 million dwarfs the cost of $100,000 net amount at risk if they pay out 5% more than the cash value. Okay, folks, you need to learn this because this is incredible when you understand this. My son Emron came up with this metaphor of a 5-story building. If the IRS said, Doug, you're building a 5-story apartment complex, tell you what, Mr. Andrew, if you will just rent out the first floor the first year, and then the first day of the second year, you can rent out the second floor, and then after 4 years and 1 day, you can rent out the entire building, and now all of your rental income forever after is tax-free. Do the math. That's a no-brainer. That's what TAMRA means with IUL. You have to let it fill up. According to TAMRA, when you do, it turns into a tax-free cash cow forever after. It's a long-term strategy, 5 years or longer. You don't treat IUL like it's a drive-up window in a bank. Now, if somebody's putting in 500 grand and they put in 200,000 in 2 years, can they access some of that? Sure. But I usually tell them, well, let's wait till we get all the money in there first. Okay. Now, indexing, the beauty of this, $1 million of cash value. Let's say you've got that snapshot in time. You should all know this. If the general account portfolio is 4%, which is the lowest it's ever been, it was as high as 15.5% back in the 80s. My clients never got credited less than 11.75% from 1980 to 1990. Did you know that? Yeah, interest rates are high. But now the general account portfolio, the lowest it's been is 4. Anytime you feel bearish about America, like you think we're headed for a recession, you can just settle for the 40,000. Just give me a 40,000 tax-free credit on my policy, okay? Now, anytime you feel bullish about America, you're not telling the insurance company to take 1 dime of your million and invest it in that volatile market I showed you. No, the million has to stay safe in the insurance company, earning 4 in this example. What are you giving up? You're relinquishing the 40,000, the 4% interest. Here, insurance company, you take that $40,000 of interest on my million, and you fund an options budget. And if the market goes up 8, you'll pay me 80,000. If it goes up 12, you'll pay me 120,000 on my million. But if I guess wrong and the market tanks, I still want my million.
Right.
And it's there because you only gave up the 4% that you were earning to fund an options budget.
Right.
You wouldn't believe how many times I start a seminar and I go, folks, today you will learn in the next hour how an insurance company only earning 4 or 5% on the general account portfolio can afford to credit you 8%. And not only that, I'm going to show you, if you only got 8%, how you can pull out 10% a year and never deplete your nest egg.
That's bananas.
By using the arbitrage of index loans, okay? It's magic. It's how money works. Mm-hmm. Okay. In my book, chapter 6, this is how it's explained. And this shows the worst period from 2007 out here to 2012. Money in the market wasn't even back to break even. 500 grand wasn't even back to break even. Using just a 10.5% cap, you ended up with nearly 700 grand. That is probably the most conservative example which we use in our books, okay? If you don't understand indexing because it's new to you, if the market went up 50, down 50, up 50, down 50, what's your rate of return? You wouldn't believe how many advisors say 0, flat. No. If you have 100,000 and the market goes up 50%, you got 150. Now the market loses 50%, you lose 50% of 150, you're down to 75 grand. Now the market goes up 50%, you're up to 112.5. Now it loses 50% of 112.5, you're down to $56,000. The market goes up 50, down 50, up 50, down 50, that's not 0. If the market went up 10, down 10, up 10, down 10 for 10 years, you would end up with a, they will say it's a zero, whoops. Where are we here? Here. They will say, well, that is just a 10%. No, you actually lost nearly, you only have 95,000 if it goes up 10, down 10, up 10, down 10. But what if it went up 10 and when it went down, you didn't lose? You didn't make anything, but you didn't lose. 5 years you make money, the other 5 years you don't make anything, zero's your hero. Look at that, you'll end up with 161,000 instead of losing 5 grand. That's the difference, that's indexing, simplified. I like to simplify with my clients. I have under my desk a ratchet wrench and a regular wrench. And I say, see, a lot of times with a regular wrench, you progress in the market like playing red light, green light when you're a kid, and then you're going back and forth. The market loses and you're losing the gain that you made. Look at this ratchet wrench. See, I tighten the bolt, I make progress, but then I just reset. Click, 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 click. I don't lose anything. I don't lose the progress I made with the ratchet wrench. That's indexing. Okay? Does that make sense? You lock in your gains and you reset. You don't lose. Okay. A lot of people don't understand that a 25% loss has to be followed by a 33% gain. Or a 33% loss has to be followed by a 50% gain. If I have 100 grand, it goes down to 67,000. 67,000 has to grow by 50% to make up for that 33% loss. Remember this math because it works with taxes, okay? So here we go. The 3 biggest dangers that IUL solves that causes most Americans to outlive their money are taxes, inflation, and market volatility. When you help your clients with max funded IUL, you eliminate those dangers. You make them immune by doing what? Converting some or all of their income. I recommend that 40 to 60% of your retirement income shouldn't even show up on the front page of your 1040 tax return. And people say, is that legit? I said, absolutely. And then some people, they see that and then they want 100% of the money to be tax-free, and we have many clients that do that. But remember, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Don't go hogging all their money all at once, okay?
I do.
Convert to tax-free, and they're immune from taxes going up. You link their returns to the things that inflate. I don't like inflation any more than anybody, but it doesn't hurt me, it helps me. And indexing, use indexing so that you participate when the market goes up, but you don't lose when the market goes down. The 3 greatest strengths of properly structured max funded IUL is what? Liquidity. That's the #1 key element of a prudent investment. The ability to access your money. 2, safety of principal. Not only safety of the institution, the multi-trillion-dollar insurance industry is the backbone of America. I mean, the Great Depression, banks closed, 40% never opened their doors again. Real estate dropped 80% in some areas. Insurance companies came through with flying colors. Same thing happened in 2008, okay?
But they still
Folks, but safety of principal, but I define that as in a year that I make money, I want any money I made last year to become newly protected principal, meaning I don't want to lose in future years money I made in previous years. That's what IUL does, okay? You earn a predictable rate of return that has outpaced inflation, which I've always done. So on my book, I have these 4 pillars, okay? That stand for liquidity, safety, rate of return, and tax benefits. LASER is an acronym that means liquid assets safely earning returns. So you can score any investment where you put money on a scale of 1 to 10 based on those 4 key elements of a prudent investment. And they're in the proper order. Liquidity is #1. People get into trouble when they lack liquidity, okay? Most people just go out after rate of return and they give up liquidity or safety, which is #2. Then it's rate of return, and then it's the tax advantages is icing on the cake. Now, for years I had this risk return paradigm in my books where I list 16 general categories of investments from highest risk to lowest risk. If you apply the liquidity test, this many fail. You can't get your money quick enough. Like a home or a piece of real estate, you have to sell it, and it may not be a good time to sell it, or you need to borrow to get the equity out of that real estate. And sometimes when you need it the worst, it's the hardest to get because lenders don't loan you money based upon your equity. They loan you money based on your ability to repay. If you lack that, they're not going to give you your money. Folks, this many more don't pass the safety test. You can lose your principal. This many more don't pass the rate of return test. I'm only down to 3 possible survivors. A very small handful of mutual funds, a small handful of annuities, and #12, max funded insurance. Now what about annuities? Now I've never owned one. I don't know if I ever will. Annuities are okay, but they're only tax deferred, right? And they're taxable LIFO, last in, first out. So if we took a fixed indexed annuity, okay, what does that rate on a scale of 1 to 10 for liquidity? Only about a 3. When we talk about safety on a scale of 1 to 10, they're about a 9. Rate of return, they're only about a 3 to 5. When we talk about tax advantages, they're only tax deferred, so they only rate between 4 and 6. You add up those numbers and you might get a score of 19 to 23 out of a possible 40. 40 is a perfect score. Nothing gets a perfect 40. Why do I like IUL? Watch. Max Fund Insurance gives me tax-favored harvest. If you're a farmer and you're going to buy your seed in the springtime, and you don't have to pay tax on what you pay for the seed, and you plant it, you irrigate, you cultivate, and in the fall you harvest your crops, and now you agree to pay tax on what you sell your harvest for. That's a traditional IRA or 401k. You get a tax break on the seed money, you agree to pay tax during the harvest. I would rather pay tax on the seed and enjoy the harvest without tax. Okay? So, when we talk about liquidity, a max funded IUL, structured correctly and funded properly, liquidity, it scores at least an 8 out of 10. Safety, 9 out of 10 like an annuity. Rate of return is 8 out of 10. When we talk about tax advantages, nothing else does this. I've taught advanced continuing education to CPAs and tax attorneys, and by the way, I teach my master's group how to teach 3 hours of advanced continuing education to CPAs and tax attorneys, and they will turn into bird doggers. They will point people to you all day long, okay? Now, folks, I've always asked the CPAs, show me any other vehicle in the Internal Revenue Code that does that. Accumulate your money tax-free, allows you to access that money tax-free even before the age of 59 and a half without a 10% penalty. But when you ultimately die, it not only transfers income tax-free, but it blossoms. It increases in value. And they go, well, how much does that cost? I say, well, nothing's free, but it doesn't cost me anything. It's being, the cost of the insurance being covered with a minuscule portion of money that most people shell out in unnecessary tax. They have to earn 15% to net 10. I only have to earn 11 to net 10. That 1% is the cost of insurance the IRS says has to be there. I would rather earn 11 to net 10 than have to earn 15 to net 10. Blah, 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 you know? But the CPAs, they get it. They go, wow. You add those numbers up, an IUL is at least 35 out of 40. It dwarfs almost every other place Americans are putting their money today. Keep it simple with a scorecard. I'm sorry I'm going so slow. I've always liked the story of the 3 little pigs. You know, I own real estate, but I've never paid a down payment for any piece of real estate I've acquired. I've satisfied them, but not with my money, okay? You probably know this if you've read my books. I like to participate in the stock market, but I keep my serious cash safely tucked over here in a house of bricks. Out of all of these, a property structured max funded insurance contract is by far the best. Now, why do I do this? Because the big bad wolf. Who's the big bad wolf? People say the IRS. No, I'm not. It's the pandemics. It's the terrorist attacks. It's the volatile economy. That's going to keep happening. And I want to sleep when the big bad wolf wind blows. And so I keep my money in a house of bricks. I benefit when my real estate goes up in value, but when my real estate goes down in value, I don't lose a dime because it's not in there, it's over here. When the market goes up, I benefit with IUL, but when the market goes down, I don't lose. So keep it simple, okay? Money has to have a home. Keep your money safely tucked in a house of bricks. Okay, here's a mind map. There are 38 benefits I teach of IUL. Liquidity, safety, rate of return, and so forth. But you know, there's one over here that some people say, well, I never thought of it that way. How many of you have ever had anybody look at your illustration and they go, well, what's this 0 column over here? It runs out. What's this run out? You know, well, that's the guaranteed, you know, how do you answer that? I go, oh, that's one of the beauties of IUL. See, under the guaranteed column, it's assuming the worst, as if you earn 0 forever, which has never happened. And the insurance company charge you the highest mortality cost they're allowed by law to do. That's the worst case scenario. But that's actually a huge benefit. Why? Jim and Mary, I have a lot of very high net worth clients. multimillionaires and billionaires. This has saved them in lawsuits. Because if they get sued, and I've done with the attorney the proper job, I keep all of their assets in separate LLCs. They can only be sued if they slip on this porch, or they do for that particular property, because that's a separate LLC. But there's no equity in that property because it's over here in the IUL.
Come on now.
And the IUL is next to impossible
right.
to demonstrate in courts of law.
That's right.
Because
Come on, Doug.
if you go to court and you have a multimillionaire and they say, yes, I've got $5 million over here in this life insurance policy, if you have an expert witness, which I've been, Your Honor, see this worst case scenario? If you tapped into this $5 million in their life in their IUL, and worst case happened, it would run out of money, and the non-related parties to this lawsuit, the beneficiaries, would suffer economically, and you would be in trouble. So this is off limits.
Yeah.
See, you flip the flaws.
Come on, expert witness.
You make it a positive. Well, you got some epiphanies there, right? Okay. Now, one of my favorite quotes is Albert Zandrowski. He won the Nobel Prize twice in his lifetime. He said, discovery consists of seeing what everybody has seen, but thinking what nobody else has thought. Now, many times I'll have a box of baking soda, and I'll say, what are some uses for this? And you wonderful women will say, oh, you can soak in the tub, you can take the odor out of the refrigerator. And the men say, well, I clean my battery terminals, I clean out my drain, plug drains. And then finally somebody goes, oh, it's good for baking. Duh, yeah, okay? We use life insurance for life, for living benefits. Quit focusing on what it is, focus on what it does, okay? It's imperative that you learn not only the what and the why, but the how, okay? I can't do that in 1 hour, but folks, here is an actual IUL policy, one of my son's policies, just 13 years into the contract. Look at this. Average rate of return retroactive back to day one, 12.88%. 12.88%. The cash value was $110,000, okay? I had a critic on my YouTube channel, and he goes, show me any IUL that has ever grown to more than the original illustration. I'll pay you $1,000. I've done it about 1,000 times now, and he's not paid me a dime, okay? Folks, in the 13th year, the original illustration said he was going to have $63,000, and he would have been thrilled. We under-promised and over-delivered by giving him $110,000. You can do this. Okay? My son's agency is called Laser Financial, and under Laser Financial / IUL Performance Watch, my son posts every month statements of actual IUL policies. You probably can't see these, but 19.8, 8.77, 23.3, 8.27, 32.65. See, this is what we achieve for our clients by rebalancing. February, we do like usually between 15 to 30 actual policy snapshots. Now, how do we do that? Here is a sophisticated way to look at rebalancing. In March 2020, what happened? COVID. The market dropped 30%. When there's anxiety, there's opportunity. My sons contacted 800 of their clients in one fell swoop and said, here we go. The market crashed. This is good news. You make the world's bad news your good news when you have IUL. Switch to a 1-year point-to-point with no cap. Now, we usually don't do that. That's a threshold strategy. Threshold means whatever it does, you subtract 5% off the top. So if you average 12, you only get a net 7. So we usually don't use that in normal times. But from March of 2020 to March of 2021, the market went up 66.33% from the low. See, when the market goes down to a low, you get to start from there now. The next year, 66.33 minus 5, our clients, 800 of them got credited 61.33% in one single year on their IUL. Okay, look at this. 852,000 is what this guy had in his IUL. And that wasn't all of it. That was it. He wish he would have allocated all of it. That turned into $1,387,000. He made $535,000 tax-free in 1 year because we met with them and said, Link, Change your strategy. Now, if the next year the market would have crashed, he wouldn't have lost one dime of the 535,000 we made. We locked in that gain and we reset. Are you connecting the dots?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Folks, I've got to, let me get to the 4% rule and whole life. Let me go to whole life. Okay. Now, sometimes I get people that say, well, I'm a fee-based advisor, I'm going to be cheaper. Oh, really? So, I imagine you're talking to a realtor, I want you to find me a 5-bedroom home in this area for a price of $500,000. And the realtor says, I'd be glad to. And then the realtor, when I ask for what their commission, well, I'll charge you one time 6%, $30,000, or else you can just pay me 1% of the value of this house every year for the next 30 years. That's an asset manager, okay? In other words, on this chart I showed you a moment ago, whoops, come on. There we go. If you were able to do what I said, achieve 9.6, 8 million, my commission on an IUL was 30 grand. One time on the money that went in. I didn't make one dime on the growth from that. And here's the asset manager saying that's expensive. Asset managers charging 1% every year on that. And if they did achieve the same 8 million, they would have made just under 1 million in commission. And they have the audacity to say, oh, IUL, they're just out for the commission. Oh, really? You're not even netting 8 million. You're only netting 6 million in a 25% tax bracket. What are you talking about? We're so much better. Now, last of all, let me just talk about the whole life. Under TEFRA and DEFRA guidelines, usually more insurance is required. Under TAMRA, you have to spread it out longer. You can't get the money in as fast. The guarantees actually cost you money and uses up about 2%. And if you earn 8, you're going to net 5.9. If you earn 6, you're going to net maybe 4.27, and I'll prove it to you, okay? So I always tell whole life agents, I want you to fund a whole life policy with 500 grand, let's say, as fast as you can, take the least death benefit, go down the road to a certain age, start taking out tax-free income, and let's calculate the internal rate of return. They can't even come close to an IUL. Here's why. Here is a whole life policy, $100,000 a year for 5 years. Actually, I think this created a MEC. I think the most you could put in is 71,000. But let's just say they put in 100,000 for 5 years. There's another 38,000 that's came out of dividends or something because they had to meet a certain premium requirement. 500 grand, we let it sit there and grow into this policy down the road. Now, that's what they put in. I said, start taking out income at age 66. The most they could take out was 40,000 a year tax-free out of that whole life policy, okay? Now, you look at the death benefit, it was about $1.7 million, increasing, and then it dropped down dramatically when they started this. Folks, that's the whole life. Here's the key of internal rate of return. At a dividend rate of 6%, the internal rate of return was 4.27. The difference, it was gobbling up, the whole life was gobbling up 1.73%. If the whole life earns 8, you're only going to net about 5.9%. Did you know that? The costs are gobbling up about 2 percentage points. Why do I like IUL? Let's use the same example. I can get in more money quicker, $126,000 a year for 4 years. I'm funded in there, and I can start taking out $70,000 a year down here, tax-free. What would you rather have, $70,000 of tax-free income or $40,000? Which, by the way, is probably taxable because I think they created a MEC with that illustration. Folks, the death benefit, I got away with a little bit less. It's still $1.5 million, but here's the difference. This universal life was only using a crediting rate of 6.33. I think this is nationwide. The internal rate of return, 6.09. What went toward the cost of insurance on this policy retroactive back to day one? Less than 0.25%. You earn 6.33 and you net 6.09. See the difference?
Yeah.
When you get educated, you're going to see how to structure these correctly and manage it properly. And then you meet with your clients annually. Folks, this is the most incredible industry. The things we can do to help people, but there's a lot of myths out there we have to dispel because they get the wrong information. I need your help. We need to turn this world right side up. So as we do that, If you set up an IUL, if premium costs and fees are not being covered by just a fraction of the growth within the first few years, you better look at it, you better have it audited and get it straightened out. If the cash accumulation value is not greater than the premiums paid into the policy by the 5th year, most of my clients, the cash value exceeds the premiums paid in. You wouldn't believe how many IUL policies I see. In the 20th year, the cash value doesn't even come close to the aggregate premiums they paid in, let alone the death benefit. Most of my clients, the death benefit, okay, the cash value grows to equal or exceed it by the 10th, 15th, 20th year. Those are telltale signs. If you look at an IUL policy, if that isn't true, you could have designed it better and funded it better. Does that make sense? Okay. Well, folks, let's see. There are going to be 3 minutes here. Keep it simple. In an audience, I'll go back to 1975, the year after I started. If you had $500,000 invested in the market, in the S&P 500, this is what you'd be on this roller coaster ride here in the red. There's the turn of the century, 2001, 2000, and then here's again 2008. You might end up with 5.6 million in the market. The one in the green is indexing that achieved 8 million. And then you simplify it, and I just say to the audience, so folks, would you like to go through a roller coaster ride and a lot of heartburn and to end up with 5.6 million tax deferred? Oh, which is only worth 3.8 million after tax? Or how many of you would like the one on the right, 8 million tax free? See how simple that is? Okay. So folks, when you use the banking concept, let me just say this. When you show people how money works and how you can borrow out of an IUL, you're helping them optimize assets and do what banks and credit unions do. So I'm out of time. You've probably heard me talk about the financial Swiss Army knife. Properly structured max-funded IUL is the dream solution, not only for retirement planning, but for college funding for kids. It knocks the socks off of a 529 college savings plan. Pension maximization for school teachers, police officers, and firefighters. Working capital for business, lump sum capital transfer. Let me teach you ways that you can optimize your client's assets and minimize taxes. And instead of selling dinky little IULs, well, how much can you afford to save on top of what you're already doing? Put on your asset optimization hat and say, Jim and Mary, let me show you how much better off you could be by repositioning underperforming and non-performing assets to increase the liquidity, safety, rate of return, and tax benefits. Would you be interested in that illustration? I've never had anybody turn me down when I've asked that question. Folks, we're in a wonderful business. The world needs you.